The cargo ship was 3 hours from the drop-off point when the lights inside the cockpit turned red and a sound like tearing metal echoed through the hull. Ravi Khanna dropped his food container and grabbed the flight controls, but it was already too late. Something had locked onto his ship from the outside, and no amount of pulling or pressing buttons was going to change that. A Gorvathi patrol cruiser, 6 times the size of his little freight hauler, had clamped a tractor beam onto him and was dragging him sideways through open space like a fish on a hook. Ravi had been running cargo between human colonies and neutral trade stations for 4 years. He knew the shipping lanes. He knew where the borders were. He had not crossed into Gorvathi territory. But the two soldiers who cut through his airlock door 10 minutes later did not care about that. They were tall, scaled, broad as doorways, and they looked at him the way a butcher looks at something hanging from a hook. They scanned him with a device that hummed and blinked. One of them made a noise that sounded like grinding stones. The other grabbed Ravi by the arm and pulled him out of his own ship without a word. He was taken aboard the cruiser, stripped of his jacket, his boots, his belt, everything that was his. They put him in a cold metal room with no window and no seat. The door locked behind him with a sound that felt permanent. He did not know it yet, but he had just been selected for the grand spectacle. The Gorvathi Dominion was an empire built on the idea that strength was the only thing that mattered. They ruled over dozens of species across 6-star systems, and they kept that rule through fear. And nothing fed that fear better than the Crimson Arena. Once every cycle, the arena hosted a tournament. Fighters from every conquered species were thrown into it, and the Gorvathi watched them break. It was entertainment. It was politics. It was a reminder to every subject race that the Gorvathi were on top and everyone else was beneath them. This cycle, they needed fresh blood. Viewership had been dropping. The outer provinces were getting restless. High Sovereign Palux, the aging ruler of the Dominion, had ordered his patrols to sweep the border corridors and grab anything interesting that a human was interesting. Ravi was transported to Gorva's Prime, the throne world, and taken underground into the fighter pits beneath the arena. The pits were a maze of stone corridors and iron gates. The air was thick and warm and smelled like blood and sweat, and something chemical he could not name. Other captive fighters sat in cells along the walls. Some were huge. Some had claws. Some had too many eyes. None of them looked at him. That a small figure appeared at the bars of his cell. She was bird-like, barely reaching his chest, with thin feathered arms and large dark eyes that looked like they had seen too much. Her name was Naya. She was a Silith, a translator, and she had been a slave in the pits for 6 years. She told him where he was. She told him what the arena was. She told him that no off-worlder had ever survived past the second round. Ravi listened. He asked how many rounds there were. She said 6. He asked who the champion was. She said a Gorvathi named Dro Shan, undefeated in over 300 fights for arms, armored skin, and a reputation that made other fighters surrender before the bout even started. Ravi nodded slowly. He sat down on the stone floor of his cell and leaned his back against the wall. He did not panic. He did not shout. He did not beg. Naya watched him with confusion. Every new fighter she had seen reacted with terror or rage or despair. This one just sat there, breathing slowly, looking at the ceiling like he was counting something in his head. She did not know that Ravi had grown up in the back alleys of Old Delhi, fighting in underground rings since he was 16 years old. She did not know that he had broken bones, lost teeth, slept on concrete, and gone days without food. She did not know that the thing sitting in that cell was not a soft creature from Soft World. It was a survival machine wrapped in skin that happened to bruise easily. That evening, Warden Goltha came down to the pits. He was a thick, scarred Gorvathi with one cracked tusk and a voice like dragging chains. He walked along the cells, looking at the new arrivals the way someone might look at items on a shelf. When he reached Ravi's cell, he stopped. He looked at the human for a long time. Then he laughed at it. Was a deep, wet, ugly laugh. He said something in Gorvathi to the guards beside him. Naya, standing nearby, translated it quietly for Ravi. He said, "You will be the opening act. A bit of comedy before the real fighting begins." Ravi looked at the warden through the bars. He did not smile. He did not flinch. He just looked. Goltha stopped laughing after a moment. Something about the human's eyes made the air feel slightly different. He shook it off, snorted, and walked away. I in the cell across the corridor. A massive Drenix fighter with stone-gray skin and cracked knuckles had been watching the whole exchange. He leaned forward and spoke in broken common tongue. "You are dead, small thing." Ravi closed his eyes and leaned his head back against the wall. "Maybe," he said, "but not today." The gate lifted with a grinding sound that shook the floor beneath Ravi's feet, and the noise that hit him was like walking into a wall. Over 1,000,000 Gorvathi packed into the Crimson Arena, their voices rolling down from the stands like thunder that never stopped. The sky above was a dull orange, and the arena floor was a wide circle of packed red dirt stained dark in patches from old fights. Ravi walked out barefoot. They had given him nothing. No weapon, no armor, no shield, just a pair of loose gray trousers and his own skin. Across the arena floor, a second gate opened. The thing that came out moved on 6 legs, low to the ground, fast even while standing still. A Fendraki. Its body was built like a flattened insect the size of a horse, with bladed limbs that ended in edges sharp enough to cut steel. Its head was flat and eyeless, but it tracked movement through vibration. The moment Ravi's bare feet touched the dirt, it knew exactly where he was. The crowd cheered. This was what they came for. A small, pale, soft creature from some nowhere planet, about to be opened up across the arena floor like a gift being unwrapped. Ravi stood still. He watched the Fendraki move. It circled him at a distance, testing, feeling the vibrations of his steps. He kept his breathing even. He had fought against faster opponents before. In the underground rings of Delhi, there was a fighter named Sonu who moved like water and hit like a truck. Ravi had lost to Sonu 3 times before he learned the lesson that saved his life every time after. Speed does not matter if you make the fast thing come to you. The Fendraki lunged. It crossed 15 meters of dirt in less than a second, its bladed forelimbs slashing forward in a pattern designed to cut a target into 3 pieces. Ravi stepped sideways. Not far, just enough. The blades passed through the space where his chest had been a heartbeat earlier, and the creature's momentum carried it past him. He turned with it, keeping his eyes on its legs, reading the way its weight shifted. The crowd went quiet for half a second. Then the noise came back, louder, confused. The Fendraki turned and came again. Faster this time. Ravi moved again, sideways, just barely, letting the attack miss by centimeters. He did not try to hit back. Not in the royal gallery high above the arena floor. High Sovereign Palux leaned forward in his seat. His advisors exchanged glances. The Fendraki attacked 6 more times. Each time, Ravi was not where the blades landed. Each time, the creature grew more aggressive, more desperate, spending more energy. It was a predator designed for quick kills. It was not built for a long fight. On the 9th charge, the Fendraki was slower. Just slightly. Just enough. Ravi moved in. He ducked under the slashing limbs, grabbed the creature's neck joint with both hands, and locked his legs around its midsection. The Fendraki thrashed wildly, spinning and slamming its body against the ground trying to throw him off. Ravi held on. His grip was iron. He had spent years building that grip, hanging from pipes in abandoned buildings, squeezing rubber balls until his forearms burned, holding onto opponents who were bigger and meaner and wanted him dead that he squeezed. The Fendraki had no defense against chokehold because no species in the arena had ever used one. It was not a technique that existed in Gorvathi combat. It was not a known strategy on any world in the Dominion. It was something born in the back streets of a planet these aliens had never bothered to study. The Fendraki's legs buckled. Its body went limp. It collapsed onto the red dirt, still breathing but unable to move. Ravi let go and stood up. His arms were shaking. There were shallow cuts across his ribs and left forearm where the blades had grazed him. Blood ran down his side, bright red against his brown skin. The arena was silent. 1.2 million Gorvathi and not a single sound. They had expected 15 seconds of slaughter. They had gotten something they did not understand. Then a murmur began. It spread through the stands like a ripple through water. Not cheering, not anger, confusion. The guards came and led Ravi back through the gate. In the corridor below, Naya was waiting. Her dark eyes were wide and her feathered hands were trembling. "You won," she said, as if she did not believe the words coming out of her own mouth. Ravi leaned against the corridor wall and pressed his hand against the cut on his ribs. He winced but said nothing about the pain. Instead, he looked at Naya and asked her a question. "How many days until the next round?" 2 days, she said. He nodded. Then he asked about the next opponent. What species? What size? What weapons? How they fought? Naya answered every question, her voice growing steadier as she realized what she was looking at. This was not a man who had survived by accident. This was a man who planned to keep surviving. Up in the royal gallery, Palux replayed the fight on his personal screen 3 times. He watched the way the human moved. He watched the way it read the Fendraki's pattern and waited for the right moment. His military advisor suggested eliminating the human before the next round. Palux shook his head, and "Oh," he said, "the people are watching. Let them watch a little longer." If he did not yet understand that he had just made the worst decision of his reign. By the 3rd morning in the pits, the other fighters had stopped ignoring Ravi. They watched him now from their cells as he moved through the corridor during the short exercise period. Some watched with curiosity, some with something closer to fear. The Drenix across the hall, the one who had called him a dead thing, no longer spoke at all. He just sat in the back of his cell and stared at the wall. Ravi's second opponent was a creature called a Drenix, though not the same one from the cells. This one was brought in from another holding facility, and it was enormous. Nearly 3 meters tall, with skin like cracked granite and fists the size of Ravi's entire torso. It moved slowly, but every step made the arena floor shake. The crowd expected a correction. The first fight had been a mistake, a freak accident. This fight would put things right. The human would be crushed, and everything would go back to normal. Ravi did not try to choke this one. You cannot choke a thing made of rock. Instead, he moved. He ran, dodged, ducked, and circled, keeping just outside the range of those massive arms. Every time the Drenix swung, Ravi was already somewhere else. The creature grew frustrated. It bellowed. It stomped. It threw itself forward with all its weight. Ravi had noticed something during the first 30 seconds. The Drenix had joints, just like anything else that moved. Knees, elbows, the place where the neck met the skull. Stone skin meant nothing if the joints still needed to bend, that he waited for a lunge, sidestepped, and drove his elbow into the back of the Drenix's knee. The leg buckled. The creature stumbled. Ravi hit the same knee again, and again. On the fourth strike, the Drenix dropped to one leg. Ravi climbed its back, wrapped his arm around its throat, and squeezed the sides of the neck where the blood vessels ran close to the surface. The skin there was thinner. Not soft, but thinner. It took nearly 2 minutes. The Drenix fought the whole time, reaching back, trying to grab him, slamming its own body against the arena wall to shake him loose. Ravi held on with everything he had. His arm screamed. His fingers went numb, but he did not let go. The Drenix fell face first into the dirt. The arena erupted, not in cheers but in noise, raw and confused, like a hive that had been kicked. Ravi stood up with blood running from a deep gash across his ribs where the Drenix had scraped him against the wall. He walked back through the gate without looking at the crowd. His third bout came the next day. Twin Kiwi fighters, small and fast, with claws that dripped venom. One scratch, and the poison would shut down his nervous system in minutes. The Kiwi fought as a pair, circling from opposite sides, attacking in turns so the target never had time to recover. Ravi had asked Naya about the Kiwi the night before. She told him they hunted by coordination. One would distract while the other struck from behind. They had no individual fighting instinct. They only knew how to work as a team. Ravi broke the team. He charged directly at the one on his left, something no arena fighter had ever done against the Kiwi. It panicked and darted sideways, crashing into its partner. For 2 seconds, they were tangled together, hissing and clawing at each other by instinct. Ravi used those 2 seconds to grab a handful of arena dirt and throw into the face of the nearest one. Blinded, it lashed out wildly, its venomous claws raking across its own partner's arm. The poisoned Kiwi dropped in seconds. The remaining one, now alone and terrified, backed away. It looked up at the royal gallery as if asking for permission to stop, and permission came. Ravi finished it with a single strike to the base of the skull. Quick, clean. He did not let it suffer. The crowd had a new word for him now. Naya translated it later in the pits, her voice quiet with something between wonder and worry. They're calling you the Unbreaking, she said. His fourth fight was different. Not a beast, not a predator, a Gorvathi soldier. Disgraced, stripped of rank, thrown into the arena to earn redemption through combat. He was smaller than Dr. Oshan but trained, disciplined, and smart. He did not charge blindly. He studied Ravi's movement, adapted, and countered. The fight lasted longer than any bout in the tournament. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the human and the Gorvathi traded blows, circled, clashed, separated, and clashed again. Ravi took hard hits. A strike to his shoulder that nearly dislocated it. A knee to his stomach that dropped him to the dirt. But he got back up. Every time, he got back up. In the 5th minute, Ravi shot forward with a move no alien species had ever seen. A double-leg takedown, born in wrestling gyms on Earth, perfected in alley fights in Delhi. He drove the Gorvathi onto his back, pinned him, and locked a submission hold on his arm until the joint bent the wrong way and the soldier roared in pain. The soldier tapped the ground. Surrender. Ravi released him immediately. He stood, offered the soldier his hand, and helped him to his feet. The soldier stared at him, breathing hard, and for a moment something passed between them that had nothing to do with the arena or the crowd or the empire watching from above. In the royal gallery, Palux sat very still. His advisors were no longer suggesting anything. They were afraid to speak. Below, in the pits, Naya met Ravi at the gate. Her eyes were wet. You know what happens next? She said. Ravi nodded. The final round. The champion. Dr. Oshan. Naya came to Ravi's cell in the middle of a night cycle, when the pit lights dimmed to a dull orange glow and the guards changed shifts. She moved quietly on her thin, bird-like legs, pressing herself against the wall to avoid the security beams that swept the corridor every 40 seconds. She slipped a small piece of folded material through the bars. It was a thin strip of synth cloth, the kind used to line supply crates. On it, someone had printed a message in human standard text, tiny and precise. Ravi unfolded it and read that we know you are there. Stay alive. Final round. Extraction is being planned. Do not trust the warden. Do not trust the sovereign's word. Just survive. Hall. Liro's Station. Commander Brenhall was a human military attaché stationed at the neutral trade hub of Liro's Station, the closest point of human presence to Gorvathi space. He had received a smuggled transmission 2 days ago from one of Naya's old contacts in the supply chain, a Silith trader who still remembered the girl who had been taken from her homeworld years ago. Hall could not send a fleet. Humans had no authority inside the Dominion, and any military move would start a war they were not ready for. But he could send a message, and he could start putting pieces into place for something quieter. Ravi read the message twice, then ate it. The synth cloth dissolved on his tongue like paper. He looked at Naya through the bars. How did you get this? She shook her head. You do not need to know that. You need to know what is happening above, she told him. High Sovereign Palix had called a public address that evening, broadcast across every screen in the Dominion. He stood in the royal gallery of the arena, dressed in full ceremonial armor, and spoke to billions. He announced that the final bout of the grand spectacle would be between the human and the reigning champion, Dr. Oshan. But he added something that no one expected. He made a wager. A formal, binding, public wager under Gorvathi honor law that if the human won, he would be released, free to leave Gorvathi's space. His species would be acknowledged as worthy of respect under Dominion law. That if the human lost, humanity would be formally classified as a slave race. Every human found within Dominion borders would be subject to capture and forced labor. The arena roared with approval. The outer provinces, watching on their screens, went very quiet. Naya's voice was shaking as she told Ravi this. He sat on the floor of his cell and listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence between them lasted a long time. He is using you, Naya said. He does not believe you can win. He wants to use your death to send a message to every species that is thinking about rebellion. He wants them to see that even the strange new creature from the death world can be broken. Ravi looked at his hands. They were bruised and swollen, the knuckles scraped raw from 4 fights. His ribs ached with every breath. The cut from the Drenix had been stitched by Naya, using supplies she had stolen from the medical bay, but it still pulled when he moved. He asked her to get him footage of Dr. Oshan's fights. Naya stared at him. That is impossible. The fight recordings are kept in the warden's personal archive. I cannot access them. You have been a slave here for 6 years, Ravi said quietly. You know every corridor, every guard rotation, every blind spot in this place. You got a message smuggled in from a station light years away. You can give me those recordings. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded and disappeared into the dark. She returned the next night with a data chip the size of her thumbnail. Ravi watched the recordings on a cracked screen Naya had pulled from a broken monitoring unit. He watched 12 of Dr. Oshan's fights. He watched them each 3 times. Dr. Oshan was everything Naya had described. For arms, each one thick as Ravi's thigh. Armored plates across his chest and back. A fighting style built on overwhelming force, multiple strikes from multiple angles, fast combinations that left opponents no room to breathe. He had not been taken to the ground in over 200 fights. No one had even tried. Getting close to those 4 arms was considered suicide, but Ravi saw something. It was small. It appeared in only 4 of the 12 recordings, and only for a fraction of a second each time. After Dr. Oshan threw his overhead lunge, his signature killing strike, his lower left arm dropped. Just for a moment. Half a second at most. A gap in the wall of muscle and armor. Ravi played those 4 moments over and over until he could see them with his eyes closed. He spent the remaining hours before the fight in his cell. He did push-ups until his arms gave out. He shadowboxed against the wall. He practiced breathing, slow and controlled, the way he had taught himself years ago when the world was too loud and too fast, and the only thing he could control was the air going in and out of his lungs. Naya came to sit beside his cell on the last night. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The sounds of the pits filled the silence. Distant clanging, the hum of power systems, the low growl of something caged far down the corridor. Are you afraid? She asked. Every time, Ravi said. Every single time. She pressed her small feathered hand against the bars. He reached through and held it gently. Her fingers were fragile and warm. Tomorrow, he said. One way or another. She nodded. One way or another. The arena above them was already filling. The Dominion was watching. And somewhere out past the border, Commander Hall's team was moving into position. The sound was different this time. When the gate lifted and Ravi stepped onto the arena floor for the last time, the noise that fell from the stands was not excitement or mockery or confusion. It was hunger. Over 1 million Gorvathi had packed themselves into every seat, every standing platform, every balcony, and they wanted blood. Billions more were watching from screens across the Dominion, on warships, on colony worlds, on stations at the edge of known space. Every eye in the Empire was pointed at this circle of red dirt. Dr. Oshan was already waiting. He stood in the center of the arena like something carved from war itself. Nearly 3 meters tall, for arms folded across a chest plated with natural armor the color of dark iron. His legs were thick as tree trunks. His neck was wider than Ravi's waist, and his eyes were the flat yellow of something that had never once doubted its place at the top of the food chain. He looked at Ravi the way a mountain looks at rain. Mild interest. No concern. Ravi walked forward. Barefoot. Bare-chested. The cuts and bruises from his 4 previous fights still visible across his body like a map of everything he had survived. He was 40 kilograms lighter than Dr. Oshan's lightest arm. He had no armor, no weapon, no second pair of limbs to block with. He had half a second. That was all. One window, one gap, one mistake the champion did not know he made. The horn sounded that Daroshan moved first. He closed the distance in 2 strides and swung all 4 arms in a sweeping pattern that covered every angle of approach. Ravi ducked, rolled, and came up running. The fists hit the dirt where he had been standing and sent a shockwave through the ground that Ravi felt in his teeth that he circled. Daroshan followed, patient, controlled. This was not a mindless beast. This was a fighter with 300 victories who understood timing and distance and pressure. He cut off Ravi's angles, herded him toward the arena wall, and launched a combination that came from 4 directions at once. Ravi blocked what he could, which was not much. A fist caught his left shoulder, and the joint popped out of its socket with a wet crack that echoed across the arena. Pain whited out his vision for a full second. He stumbled back, gritting his teeth so hard he thought they would break. The crowd roared. Ravi grabbed his own wrist with his right hand, braced, and slammed his shoulder against the arena wall. The joint popped back in with a sound like a gunshot. He bit down on a scream and kept moving to eye in the stands. The roaring faltered. A ripple of something passed through the crowd. Not admiration. Not yet. But something close to disbelief. The human had just reset his own broken joint and kept fighting that Daroshan paused. For the first time in the fight, something shifted behind those flat yellow eyes. Not fear. Not yet. But a question. Ravi used a pause. He moved to the center of the arena, putting distance between himself and the wall, giving himself room. His left arm was functional but weak. He had maybe 10 minutes before the swelling made it useless that he did not have 10 minutes. He had to end this now that Daroshan came again. Heavy strikes, meant to overwhelm. Ravi dodged the first 3 and took the 4th across his side. Something cracked. A rib, maybe 2. He staggered but stayed on his feet. The champion pressed forward, sensing the end. The crowd was on their feet. The kill was coming to Daroshan, raised all 4 arms for his signature move. The overhead lunge. Every ounce of his massive body driven downward in a strike, meant to end fights in one blow. Ravi saw it coming. He had watched it 40 times on that crack screen in the pits. He knew the timing. He knew the angle. He knew the gap. The lower left arm dropped. Half a second. Maybe less. Ravi drove forward. Not away. Into the attack. Every survival instinct in his body screamed at him to run, and he ignored all of them. He dropped low, drove his knee into the exposed space below the champion's ribs, and felt the impact travel up through his entire body. Daroshan grunted, the first sound of pain he had made in years. Ravi followed with his right elbow to the throat, putting his full weight and the advantage of Earth's higher gravity behind it that Daroshan's head snapped back. His guard opened. Ravi jumped, wrapped his right arm around the champion's neck, locked his legs around the massive torso, and squeezed at a guillotine choke. The same hold that had ended his first fight. But this time against something 10 times stronger, 10 times more dangerous, and very much aware of what was happening that Daroshan thrashed. He slammed Ravi against the ground. He clawed at the arm around his neck with 3 free hands. He spun. He roared. He threw himself backward, trying to crush the human beneath his weight. Ravi held on. His arms burned like they were filled with molten iron. His vision narrowed to a tunnel. His cracked ribs screamed with every squeeze. Blood from a cut on his forehead ran into his eyes, and he could not wipe it away. He held on, because that was what he did. That was what he had always done. On the streets, in the rings, in the cold metal cell beneath an alien arena on a world that was not his own. He held on to Daroshan's movement slowed. His legs buckled. His arms stopped pulling. His massive body swayed once, twice, and then crashed forward into the red dirt like a falling tower. Silence. Total, complete silence across the arena. Across the Dominion. Across every screen on every world. Ravi released the hold. He rolled off the champion's body and lay on his back in the dirt, staring up at the orange sky, breathing in ragged gasps. Then he did something that no one expected. He got up. He knelt beside Daroshan, and he checked that the champion was still breathing. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of the massive neck and waited until he felt a pulse. Then he nodded, sat back on his heels, and stayed there. He did not raise his fists. He did not scream. He did not stand over the fallen body like a conqueror. He just made sure his opponent was alive. The arena did not know what to do with that. High Sovereign Palax sat in his gallery above the arena and watched the human kneeling beside the body of his fallen champion. And for the first time in his 40-year reign, he felt the ground beneath his throne shift. Not physically, something worse. The idea of his empire had just cracked, and 1 billion eyes had seen it happen. His advisors were talking, all of them at once. Their voices blurred into noise. One was suggesting they honor the wager. Another was insisting the human be killed before he left the arena floor. A third was calling for an emergency military broadcast to reassure the outer provinces. Palax raised one hand, and they all went silent. Kill him, he said, quietly. Tonight. Make it look like his injuries took him. The order was sent to Warden Goltha within minutes. Goltha smiled when he received it. He had never liked the human. He walked down to the medical bay, where Ravi was being treated for his cracked ribs and torn muscles, and he told the guards to clear the room. But Naya had been listening. 6 years as a slave in the pits had taught her many things. How to move without being seen. How to listen through walls. How to access systems that no one thought a small bird-like creature could reach. She had survived this long by being invisible, and now she used every bit of that skill for the one thing that mattered. She reached the communication relay buried in the lower levels of the arena complex. It was old, poorly maintained, and connected to the Dominion's public broadcast network through a maintenance channel that had not been updated in years. Naya did not need it to be updated. She just needed it to work for 60 seconds. She patched in a recording she had made on a stolen monitoring device. It was Warden Goltha, standing in the corridor, repeating the Sovereign's order word for word. Kill the human. Make it look natural. She broadcasted on every open channel in the Dominion. The effect was immediate. On the throne world, the arena crowd had not yet fully left the stands. The recording played on the massive overhead screens, and the murmur that rose from the crowd was unlike anything the capital had heard in living memory. The Sovereign had made a public wager under honor law. He was breaking it. The thing that held the Dominion together was not just military strength. It was the belief that Gorvathi honor meant something. And now, in front of everyone, it meant nothing. On the outer worlds, the reaction was faster. The subject races, the Silith, the Drenix, the Kiwi, dozens of species held in line by fear and the myth of Gorvathi superiority, saw the broadcast and understood what it meant. The Gorvathi were afraid. Afraid of one human. Afraid enough to cheat. 3 provinces declared independence within hours. Communication relays were seized. Gorvathi military outposts on 2 colony worlds were surrounded by local populations that had spent generations being told to stay quiet. They were not quiet anymore. On Gorva's prime, chaos spread through the capital. Palax ordered a military lockdown, but his forces were already being pulled in 6 directions. The outer fleet was too far away to respond. The inner guard was struggling to contain protests that had erupted around the arena complex itself. In the middle of that chaos, a small ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel just inside the orbital defense perimeter. It carried Commander Brenhall and a 4-person extraction team. They had been waiting at the border for 2 days, running on bad coffee and worse nerves, monitoring Gorvathi communications for exactly this kind of moment. The orbital defenses were in disarray. Half the stations had gone dark, their crews unsure whether to follow the Sovereign's orders or stand down. Hall's ship slipped through the gaps like a needle through torn fabric. They landed on the arena complex roof. Hall's team moved fast, cutting through a maintenance hatch and descending into the lower levels. They found Ravi in the medical bay, half conscious, with Naya standing guard over him, holding a stolen shock prod that was almost bigger than she was. Hall looked at the tiny bird-like alien protecting the battered human and decided in that moment that she was coming with them. They carried Ravi to the ship. Naya followed, clutching the shock prod like she would fight the entire Dominion with it if she had to. The ship lifted off as alarms blared across the complex. 2 Gorvathi interceptors gave chase, but a well-timed burst of electronic interference from Hall's co-pilot scrambled their targeting systems long enough to reach the jump point. They were gone. The Gorvathi Dominion did not collapse that night. Empires do not fall in a single moment, no matter how dramatic. But the fractures that spread from that night never healed. Within 6 months, 9 provinces had broken away. The Crimson Arena was shut down permanently after riots destroyed half the complex. Dro Shan, the fallen champion, refused to fight again. Some said he had been changed by the human, who checked his pulse instead of celebrating his defeat. High Sovereign Palax held on to power for another 2 years before a coalition of his own generals removed him. The Dominion fractured into smaller territories, some peaceful, some not, but never again united under one ruler. But on Liro's station, Ravi healed slowly. The ribs took weeks. The shoulder took longer. The bruises faded one by one until his skin was his own again. Naya was granted asylum and given quarters near the station's garden level, where she spent hours sitting among plants that reminded her of home. One evening, she found Ravi by a viewport, looking out at the stars. She stood beside him and asked what he was thinking about. Going home, he said, She asked where that was that he was quiet for a while. Then he smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and said he was still working on that. Outside the viewport, the stars burned on, indifferent to empires and arenas and the small, stubborn creatures who refused to stay down. Decades later, a Gorvathi historian would write that the fall of the Dominion could be traced not to the rebellions or the political failures or the military collapse, but to a single moment on the arena floor when a human knelt beside a fallen enemy and chose mercy. That was the moment every watching species understood that strength without compassion is just violence. And violence, no matter how grand the arena, always runs out.